Alright, we don't have a lot of time to get through all of this, so I'm just going to jump straight into it. My name's Saxon Tornow, this is my weather briefing, and we are looking at some low and high level prog charts. Let's go! Starting with a low level prognostic chart, this chart is available on Aviation Weather Center's website. It's great for getting a snapshot of large weather systems over a large area. It's great for pre-flight planning, especially when flying across country. It will let you know hazards that you may encounter during your flight. This chart covers an area in and around the contiguous United States and the atmosphere below 24,000 feet MSL over a 12-hour and 24-hour period. It's issued by the Aviation Weather Center 4 times per day. This chart in particular was issued on December 8th at 0 hours Zulu, or 5 p.m. here in Utah. On the left, we can see the chart is valid for 12 hours, and on the right for 24 hours. Looking at the 12-hour chart, we can see 5 areas of turbulence marked in dashed orange lines. In Washington, we can see a moderate turbulence starting at the surface and going to 10,000 feet MSL. In Montana is another moderate turbulence, except this one extends to 16,000 feet MSL. Here in the Southwest, we have some moderate or greater turbulence, but it seems they forgot to print the intensity and the level of the top and base. Thankfully, they included that information for our next turbulence, stretching across northern Texas. It is a moderate with a base of 2,000 feet and a top of 24,000 feet. In the northeast, we have our last large area of moderate turbulence with a top at 8,000 feet extending to the surface. In the 24-hour chart, we have only 4 areas of turbulence, all moderate, so we'll go through them fast. The northwest is from 14,000 feet to the surface. West Montana is from 18,000 feet to the surface. Southern New Mexico goes up from 18,000 feet to 24,000 feet, and the northeast goes from the surface to 8,000 feet MSL. In the 12-hour chart, we can see regions with a ceiling less than 1,000 feet and or visibility of less than 3 statute miles outlined in red. We can see them in Washington, California, Texas, and Minnesota. There is only one on the 24-hour chart in Texas. With it being winter, there is a lot of freezing going on, with surface level freezing indicated by this green zigzag in most of the northern US. We see higher level freezing in the middle northern states and cutting through the southern states at 4,000 feet. California and Texas at 12,000 feet and 8,000 feet MSL to the south of surface level freezing. On the 24-hour chart, we have surface level freezing in southern Idaho and Wyoming, North Dakota and Minnesota, the Northeast, and a small patch in northern Washington. That's right, I see you. Above the surface, we have freezing at 4,000 feet, cutting from the north to the east, and in northern Washington. 8,000 feet below both of those lines, with a small pocket in eastern Idaho, and 12,000 feet in California, Nevada, and around the Gulf of Mexico. As far as thunderstorms go, there's no thunderstorms. High-level prognostic chart. This chart is also available on the Aviation Weather Center's website. This one is intended for use in international flights, pre-flight planning, and also mid-flight, as these flights can be long and have changing weather conditions. This chart covers what are called ICAO areas, that are sections of the globe. It covers the atmosphere from 25,000 feet MSL to 63,000 feet MSL, and is valid for a 24-hour period. They're issued by the AWC and the World Area Forecast Center 4 times per day. This chart was issued December 8th at 0 hours Zulu, and will be valid for 24 hours after that. Thunderstorms are represented by these scalloped red lines, and we have a lot of them, and they are all isolated, embedded, cumulonimbus thunderstorms with bases below 25,000 feet. Southwest of Mexico, the storm extends to 45,000 feet. In the Caribbean and northern South America are 3 storms that have tops at 44,000 feet. In the northern Atlantic, there are 2 storms with tops at 35,000 feet. 2 in the mid-Atlantic have tops at 42,000 feet and 41,000 feet. In the South Atlantic, there are 2 going up to 34,000 feet and 31,000 feet. And finally, in the middle of South America, we have 3 storms with tops at 46,000 feet and 1 at 49,000 feet. Turbulence is marked in a dashed yellow line, and since there's a lot of them, we will be going from north to south. In North America, we have 3 large areas of moderate turbulence starting below 25,000 feet and going up to 40,000 feet. There are 2 in the North Atlantic, a moderate turbulence from below 25,000 feet with a top at 40,000 feet, and a severe turbulence from below 25,000 feet to 38,000 feet. West of Mexico, we have 3 moderates with tops at 40,000 feet, 2 with bottoms at 30,000 feet, and 1 with a bottom at 25,000 feet. In South America, we have 3 systems of moderate turbulence from below 25,000 feet to 40,000 feet. In Chile, we have severe turbulence from below 25,000 feet to 38,000 feet. And finally, we have severe turbulence from below 25,000 feet to 40,000 feet. Jet streams are these green lines. They are everywhere. In the northern Pacific, we have one at 31,000 feet with a core of 21,000 feet to 37,000 feet with a speed of 130 knots. Crossing Canada is another that starts at 90 knots at 34,000 feet, goes to 150 knots at 34,000 feet with a core of 24,000 feet to 42,000 feet, and ends at 130 knots at 34,000 feet. In East Canada, we have one traveling 90 knots at 27,000 feet. The one in the North Atlantic is 180 knots at 34,000 feet with a core from 16,000 feet to 50,000 feet. In the Northwest U.S., the jet stream is 130 knots and 37,000 feet, core from 21,000 feet to 44,000 feet. In California is another at 39,000 feet that starts at 100 knots and ends at 90 knots. Cutting across Mexico and the southern states is a stream at 37,000 feet and starts at 90 knots and goes to 140 knots with a core between 25,000 feet and 52,000 feet. There's a mini jet stream in the Atlantic going 90 knots at 34,000 feet. West of South America, one is 48,000 feet going 100 knots to 90 knots. One cutting across South America is 37,000 feet at 200 knots with a core between 12,000 feet and 55,000 feet. Then we have 5 small jet streams around the tip of South America, and they are 110 knots at 32,000 feet, 110 knots at 30,000 feet, 90 knots at 28,000 feet, 90 knots at 29,000 feet, and 90 knots at 32,000 feet. The tropopause is represented by these white rectangles with black numbers in them, with highs and lows represented by pentagons. We can see that in the north and south, tropopause is between 24,000 feet and 30,000 feet, and it increases till the equator, where it is between 45,000 feet and 53,000 feet. In the north, we have quite a few low spots, notably in Hudson Bay, where it gets as low as 18,000 feet. Near the equator and in the south, we can see a few high spots, with the highest in the Pacific at 58,000 feet. On this chart, we don't see any tropical cyclones, squall lines, sandstorms, or dust storms, or radioactive materials, but we do have a few volcanic eruptions, 2 near Guatemala and 1 in Ecuador. And that is it. We've looked at a low-level prognostic chart and a high-level prognostic chart. I'm still Saxon, and thanks for listening.